Top 51 tabletop games of all time, numbers 39 all the way down to 31. Why only 9 games this episode? Well, because last episode I forgot how to count. But come on back after the break. Hey everybody, welcome to All the Chef Board Game Reviews. This is a tabletop gaming hobby channel all about the tabletop gaming hobby and topics of interest for tabletop gamers. In this video, we're looking at numbers 39 to numbers 31 of my top 51 tabletop games of all time. But we're not going to do a lot of chatter. Let's just go ahead and get into the top games right now. Look at number 39. Number 39, and moving up from 42, is going to be The Gods War from Sandy Pearson's games. Now, I know you're looking at this already and going, wait, didn't he have Cthulhu Wars in his top 51 games of all time further back on the list? Why is this game higher up on the list, and why are both games on the list when they're kind of similar? Or are they? That's the big thing about The Gods War. See, The Gods War and Cthulhu Wars, while they're both games from the same designer, they are both games that definitely are not similar. And they're actually games that are quite different enough that they can actually be on the same list because they bring different things to the table. Cthulhu Wars now with Cthulhu Wars Duel has managed to actually change my list and come back on the list because it actually managed to bump Innish off my list because Cthulhu Wars has managed to create a game that plays, well, all the way from 2 players all the way up to 9 players, and eventually we know it's going to play all the way up to 11 players. But The Gods War itself, in my opinion, between the 2 games is actually the better game. Now, why am I saying it's the better game? Well, it's the better game because it is the game between the 2 games, because there's going to be comparisons, so I might as well shoot these comparisons right down, right here, right now. It's the better game, in my opinion, because it changes some certain things to make it the better game. The Gods War is a game that's taken the basic idea of an area control dudes on the map game, which is not unique to our hobby. We have so many games out here that do this, but it's taken all those concepts and evolved the basic gameplay of Cthulhu Wars to make a game that is less about the rolling of dice and less about the attacking of the other players and more about the strategy, more about the diplomacy, and definitely forces diplomacy, and it's much more about the interaction of the game between the players, these different factions, and just like Sandy Pearson is very well known for, this is an extremely asymmetric game with 8 factions that play very differently, have different strategies, different tactics, different ways they interact with the other players, while staying very, very true to the lore of the Glorantha world, which is what this game is really based on. Now, what exactly is The Gods War? The Gods War is an area control game where the players are going to take control of one of these factions, and your basic objective, like most area control games, is to get the most victory points. Whoever has the most victory points in the game is going to be the grand winner of the game. What this game has done that's unique to the area control war style games is the fact that this game, like I said, has multiple different factions that all play differently, that have different spell books which are going to give you different abilities, different factions which are going to give you different abilities, different strengths, and one thing that's really interesting, different weaknesses that every single faction has, and it's a weakness that you can never turn off on a board that evolves as the players play the game. And it's actually not just the board right here. You have sideboards, which are different locations, which actually interact with the game, and you have a board that's going to evolve as you play the game, changing how the strategies and the tactics go, and eventually open up the board in different ways, giving access to different regions, because while it's very strange to look at this tabletop board right here, understand the world of Glorantha is a giant cube. It's not a circle, it's a giant cube, which helps you understand exactly how the world looks, how things are laid off, and how the different interactions of all this map and all these interactions happens to work, how different locations connect to hell, different locations connect to the heavens, and how all this interaction is going to happen for all the different players. Now, one of the things that I really enjoy about this game, like I said, is how all these different factions are asymmetric. But beyond that, what I really actually truly enjoy about this game is the fact that this game feels much more tactical for me. This is a game that's a lot less about rolling the dice. Matter of fact, if you compare this game to Cthulhu Wars, not to jump back on that horse again here, but this is a game where you have units that actually have a lot less combat dice. Where in Cthulhu Wars, it's possible, yeah, you can probably get up to 30 attack dice if you try really hard. In this game, you're probably going to roll more like 8 or 9 attack dice. Not only that, this game has some different rules which makes movement different. It has some different rules which makes your bases that you're going to protect, not gates, but actually bases you need to protect to make sure the opponent doesn't take them over. The bases you're going to protect actually operate differently, and they actually have their own defenses. I know, what a novel concept. Your base can protect itself. Kind of cool if you really think about it. But the fact that this game actually forces players to negotiate with each other. It's not an option. You have to negotiate with the other players. It's built into the way the game plays. Because the way this game is going to play is you're going to have your action round where the player is going to move around They're going to do different things. They're going to attack each other, maybe take out some different buildings, take out different locations. They're going to go against each other, working towards getting all these victory points. But the way this game is actually working is the players actually working towards getting their spell books, which turn to victory points, and power to do things. They're working on getting area control, which can eventually potentially work out to be victory points. But they're also working towards getting these gifts right here, which can turn into also more victory points, changing how things go with the basic action flow of the game. But once the basic action round for the game itself is over, the players must move on to the actual force interaction of the game, because the game forces players to interact in the next two phases of the game. And all that occurs during the Grand Council phase, because during the Council phase, that's where all the wheeling and the dealing of this game truly happens, because one player gets to control the flow of the game, deciding which direction players get to interact, which direction the circle of the play is going to go, whether it's going to be clockwise or counterclockwise, which doesn't seem like that big of an ideal. But eventually the Council phase is working to a part where players can actually negotiate where the victory points are going to start going. That's really, really important. So people can bribe, make deals, make side deals, and say, well, if you give me these victory points, I'll do this nice thing for you here. I'll go attack this person who's become a thorn in your side. But beyond that, you also have the Chaos Rift struggle, where players actually need to do the prisoner's dilemma, where they all need to sacrifice power without letting the other players know how much power they're sacrificing. And whether or not chaos happens to be in the game or not, that is also going to influence how much players are going to sacrifice, again, playing the grand prisoner's dilemma. And then after that, the Great Compromise itself is going to happen, and that's all part of the grand strategy of the game. Now, the Gods War is a game that I enjoy immensely. This is an area control game that is very asymmetric, lots of different rules to play, but it's a game that forces interaction, forces diplomacy, and also, it also forces a little backstabbing between all the players. That's the Gods War number 39. Number 38 and dropping down from number 20 is Tyrants of the Underdark, a 2 to 4 player area control deck building game, which basically takes two great game mechanics, puts them together to create this really interesting game. Now, I guess before we should go any further, I should definitely specify that the components you're seeing out here, I blinged out the game a little bit. The basic components for the game are these little plastic shields, which just don't really look that great. I mean, okay, I guess they look okay, but what would you rather see? These little plastic shields or these cool little miniatures? I know the answer is the cool little miniatures. That's why I use them. But the basic idea of this game is this is a deck building game built with an area control game, where again, like most of your games, you're trying to get the most victory points to win the game. Here's one of the very cool things about this game. Before you start playing this game, you're going to pick two of these 4 different decks to shuffle together, create your draw pile. That's going to be the cards you're going to buy. And these cards are a little bit thematic. Now, the theme is not dripping from this game, but at least they did a pretty decent job of keeping the rough idea of the Underdark, Men's of Brands, and Dark Elves, all the different things, all kind of in this game. So they did a pretty good job of that. But every one of these decks, 2 of these 4, has a different theme built around it. And the 2 of the 4 decks that you choose, or 5 if you manage to hunt down that expansion, which is really, really hard to get a hold of, but those cards are going to create the theme of the game. Some of these cards or decks are more about control. Some of them are more about attacking the other players and gaining dominance about on the board. Some of them are about building up your house. So the 2 decks you choose are going to start playing how you're going to play the basic strategies of the game. But beyond this deck building game, what you have is this really interesting area control game, because as you gain control of these areas, if you fully gain control of these areas by knocking out whether it happens to be the rebel forces gaining control of it or happens to be the other players, once you gain control of these areas, you're going to get extra power to give you more influence to start doing other things. And as long as you hold on to these places, you're going to keep racking up victory points every single round. So you have this combination game of deck building for victory points, deck building for the ability to move your units across the board for extra control around the board, and allowing you to traverse across this board to, again, lock in these extra victory points. So the players are kind of playing 2 games at the same time that marry together really, really well. Again, you have to build your strategies around this deck building while watching the board going on right here. No single player can 100% focus on one thing. Well, actually, I should take that back, because if you have the right 2 decks, it is actually possible to kind of focus on one kind of strategy, and you can actually win doing so. So I should take that back a little bit, but generally speaking, this is a game where you need to be building your deck around a strategy, try to capitalize on that strategy while watching what all the other players do. And that's one of the fantastic hallmarks about this game. There's not just one path to victory in this game. There's multiple paths to victory, and there's multiple ways to play this game. And again, the coolest thing about this game is the gameplay strategy starts right before you start the game, because the 2 of the 4 or 5 decks, if you're one of those lucky people, is going to tell you what kind of strategies you want to start focusing on right from the beginning, because every one of these decks have their own strengths, their own weaknesses. And again, that influences how you want to be playing the game. Now, this game has got a lot of really cool replay value out of it. It plays fantastically, My only real gripe about this game is that the game is kind of dead at this point. The people who had the rights to this game, they basically lost the rights to the game, I believe at this point. They reverted back to Wizards of the Coast, which is really unfortunate because this is a game that was so ripe for multiple expansions. They could have kept putting out these little decks right here, which add more strategy, more tactics, and different gameplay, kept the basics of this game going, and kept this going for a long, long time. Now I can talk about what probably brought this game down was probably the initial price point and the fact that the game really, without blinging it out a little bit, it's not that great to look at. I mean, these shields and the back of these cards, that's about as unimpressive as you can get. Ooh, look, purple and white text. That looks fancy. No, it does not. It doesn't look fancy at all. So you have this game that kind of got hampered in the beginning, but it's such a disappointment because this is such a great game that takes two really cool game mechanics, marries them together, creates this fantastic game that's lots of strategy, lots of tactics, lots of replay variety, and tons of different paths to victory, creating this really phenomenal game. That's number 38, Tyrants of the Underdark. So, you're probably looking right now to get a free game. Who doesn't want a free game? Well, you can get a free game right here, right now. Because if you've been watching the video series, you know there's a contest. Here's the contest, here's how you enter, and here's how you win that free game. First thing you need to do is you need to send an email to Off the Shelf Board Game Reviews, that's otsbgr@gmail.com. In the subject field, you need to put in the subject field free game, except instead of putting free game, you need to put in the name of the game, and you only know the name of the game if you watch the vlog I put out in the month of January. So if you watch the January vlog, you know the name of the game. So send an email, in the subject line, put in the name of the game I announced in January, and then in the comments of the email, you're going to put in a phrase. And I'm going to give you that phrase in just 1 second. So you can put that phrase in there and you put in that phrase along with the free game giveaway. Send me that email and you're going to be entered for the contest. Now remember, people who support the channel over on Patreon get 2 entries into the contest. And I'm going to announce the grand winner of the game in the March vlog. So the first Monday of March, I'll announce the winner of the contest. So you have between now and then to enter the contest. But hurry up, because this is going to be a fantastic contest for a really awesome game. So what is the magic phrase? Well, it's coming up on the screen right now. Number 37, and jumping up from number 49, is going to be Lord of the Rings. Probably one of the most thematic games that Reiner Knizia has ever made, which is actually saying a lot because the guy has made tons and tons of games that are pretty dry and don't have a lot of theme. But let's not go there because this is a really awesome game. What is Lord of the Rings? Lord of the Rings is probably one of the original and the best cooperative games that have ever been designed, because this game takes the classic theme of the classic story from J.R.R. Tolkien and turns it into a board game that really matches the theme of the game, because the whole story of Lord of the Rings is a story of triumph over immense odds. It's a story of sacrifice, and it's a story of working against the greatest odds to overcome a great evil when everything is absolutely stacked against you. Oh, that's Lord of the Rings, the board game, pretty much in a nutshell. In the game of Lord of the Rings, this is a cooperative game where the players are going to be playing the hobbits. This game does play all the way up to 5 players, which is always a great bonus for me, because if you watch my channel for a while, you know that my gaming group usually hovers in the 5-player range. So when I have a 5-player game, it's always a game I'm going to like a heck of a lot better. But the basic idea of the game is players are going to be doing actions on this Lord of the Rings main board right here, and this represents the various locations that occur throughout the story. Many of these locations are going to come with a specific board, and the players need to play cards, rely on the help of Gandalf through cards that only have a one-time use in an effort to get these symbols all the way to the end of the tracks, because the players need to get Heart for Courage, Sun for Hope, and the power of the ring of itself in an effort to get across these boards, while flipping over these tokens, which can cause various different tragedies to occur as this token itself continues to go down the track. On top of that, there's also a little bit of a die that you have to roll once in a while. This can be a little bit of a randomizer, increasing the challenges all of our players need to encounter. The players are trying to get all the way through multiple different locations, multiple different boards, with the eventual goal of dropping the one ring into the volcano and defeating Sauron and saving all of Middle-earth from the horrible forces of Sauron and his minions. This game has done a fantastic job of incorporating the idea of sacrifice into a game where every single one of these boards, one or multiple players, has to make a sacrifice. It's not an option. The players as a group are going to make multiple sacrifices because there are never enough of these resources that are mandatory to survive every one of these boards for all the players on every single turn. So the players as a group must make constant sacrifices while sacrificing cards in kind of a, let's just call it a set matching game, because you got to match these sets of cards to make progress along the boards while watching and avoiding the eventual eye of Sauron, which is coming down and bearing down upon our heroes. And if it ever gets a hold of the ring bearer, our players have lost the game. This is a game that has an immense amount of challenge to it, immense amount of replay, an immense amount of strategy and tactics, and the best thing about everything, it's an immense story about where the players have to make sacrifice, much like the grand story of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Number 36, an oldie but a goodie, and new to the list thanks to me finally getting a hold of all the expansions for the game, is going to be 5 Tribes. Now 5 Tribes in the basic box set is a 2 to 4 player game, but getting the expansion makes it go all the way up to 5 players, which actually managed to make me get it finally onto my top 51 games of all time. But what exactly is 5 Tribes? 5 Tribes is a Mancala style game where the players are basically going to be taking pieces on the board, maneuvering them around to go ahead and gain victory points. And the basic idea of the game is you're going to start your turn, you're going to pick a location, you pick up all the tribesmen in a specific location, and then you're simply going to take them for a walk. Once you end up on the final tile, you're going to pick up all the tribesmen of a specific color, and every one of these tribesmen has a different ability. Some are going to give you victory points, some are going to allow you to assassinate other tribesmen on the board, various different things. And if you happen to be on a special tile that has a special action on it, you're going to perform the special action if it's mandatory, and if it's not a special action that's mandatory, you're going to have a choice to do it or do it, whether you do or don't. Totally up to you. But the basic idea of the game is the players are going to continuously playing overt rounds, continue to do this Mancala mechanic in an effort to gain victory points and an effort to lock down these tiles. Because if you lock down a tile, it's going to give you an amount of victory points based on it, and it's also going to give you resources that you can use to buy such as the gins, do a kind of a set matching game where you're trying to match cards together, which you can eventually sell for money, because money is your victory points and it's also your resource in the game. So it's a very strategically very deep, very rich, but it's also a game that's really simple and easy to teach people how to play. You just literally players and say, all you're going to do is pick up all the pieces of a certain color, and you're simply going to take them for a walk, and all you got to do is just make sure the last tile you place matches the color on the location. If it does so, pick up all those units, do exactly what the power of these units give you, and do exactly what the tile does, and hopefully you're going to manage to score victory points. The richness and the depth of the game comes from the fact that this is a game that has a variable setup. It's a game that has variable strategies, and it's a game that has variable tactics, and it's a game that is extremely tactical. This is a game that has a little bit of strategy, but has so many levels of tactics. It's just hard to describe how tactical this game is without playing it. Because you can look at this game and say, no, this is a super strategy game. I see my move right here, and when my turn comes around, I'm just going to do my move. 9 times out of 10, somebody also sees that move because they know just how good that move is, and they're going to do that move before you get to it, and that's what's going to drive you up the wall in a good way, but it's also part of the massive amount of strategy of this game. And like I said, one of the things I so much appreciate about 5 Tribes is this game has an immense amount of replay variety because the board layout is going to change every single time you play this game. This is not a game where you're going to master a board state, meaning the game's going to play the exact same way every single time you play the game. This is a game that evolves with the strategies between you and the other players at the table, and it evolves constantly every single time you play this game. This is one of those games that I enjoy every single time I play and bring it to the table. This is one of those games that is immensely rewarding for deep strategy, deep tactics. One of those games that's going to reward you. The more you play it, the better you get at the game. But this is also one of the small minor negatives about this game. This is a game that is so darn easy to stomp another player, especially players who have not played the game before. We're not looking like point spreads of like 1 or 2 points. We're looking at point spreads of like 50 to 60 or 70 points between a player who's good at this game and somebody who's playing the game for the first time. But if you're willing to invest the time, invest the experience, and continue to develop your strategies and keep playing your games, 5 Tribes is a fantastic game which takes the classic Mancala mechanics, basic set collection, and basic cool theme in the 1001 Arabian Nights, ties it all together to create this wonderful gaming experience for 2 to 5 players once you get that expansion. Number 35, a new list is going to be Deep State. This is a 1 to 5 player game. That's about set collection, worker placement, and gaining victory points to be the grand winner of the game. But the cool thing about this game, even though this game has a theme of the puppet organizations are working behind the scenes to take over the world government, it's also a game that's not too afraid to poke fun at itself, especially when you have the reptiloids, who are the aliens from another planet coming over to take over our planet. I know you may not catch the reference, but people in their 40s, May catch the reference for V, which was a TV series from the 80s, which was the original presence of Robert Englund. You know the guy who turned into Freddy Krueger? Yeah, so it's a game that's not afraid to poke fun at itself, but it's also a game that has a lot of deep strategy, a lot of rich gameplay, and a lot of replay variety built in this basic game. So what's the basic idea of the game? Well, this is, in a way, it's kind of a set collection game where players are trying to get these sets of cards down here, which will allow them to work towards their secret victory points, which is also going to give them extra special powers, extra special abilities, and things along those lines. The cool thing about this game is players are going to gain these cards down here in this road by sending out their agents to lay claim to that location. Here's the first mechanic about this game that I think is fantastic, and it's something that I really, really appreciate in worker placement games that have this mechanic. Now, to preface a little bit, one of the worst things I think about worker placement games is the games where it's just whoever has the first person get to a location can lock in that location. You never have any fear of reprisal, never have any fear of any problems or anything along those lines. So once you lock in your strategy, you really don't have to play the game because the game plays itself. I don't enjoy that in worker placement games, even though I really love worker placement games. I love a worker placement game with a bite where your actions are not set, and the wheeling and the dealing and also the planning is mandatory, and you have to be constantly planning and working through the game at all times. Deep State does that. Because just because I take this location with that worker, another player, as long as they're willing to send more workers to take that card, they can steal that card from me. Again, that's something I really appreciate. The next thing I really appreciate about this game is there's multiple tactics, multiple strategies, and there's different things that you work on towards gaining victory points. You can get your victory points by doing a set collection, working towards your secret victory point goals, and work towards your victory points that way. You can also work on getting victory points by working towards these certain organizations, and if you manage to work on these organizations and get far enough on the victory point track, yes, you can see that you can get a lot of victory points, and I mean a lot of victory points. 60 points if you manage to advance all the way up here is absolutely fantastic. That's pretty much half your score right here. Matter of fact, not to give away strategies, but if you lock in two things like this, and no, I'm placing my workers here wrong, but I'm just trying to illustrate how to play the game. If you want to learn how to play the game, check out my full tutorial series. But this right here would be 100 victory points. That's possibly a winning score if you lock down these two things right here. That's not the only way to gain victory points. That's not the only way to win the game. You can also hire shadow agents and start working towards these deck of cards, these tiles right here, which you're going to lay claim to from the least amount of victory points all the way down to the most amount of victory points in the order that they appear right here. So if you slowly throughout the game lock in these victory points, you guessed it, you can also win the game that way. So you have this really fantastic game that plays great from 1 all the way up to 5 players. It has multiple paths to victory, multiple different strategies. You're not locked into any strategy at all. And this is also a game that gives me a really strong feel of the classic game, one of my favorite games, which is Race of the Galaxy, which is also a set collection card game where you're trying to get these sets of cards which are going to give you powers, which can give you abilities, allow you to work towards other things. This game gives me the exact same feel and a new theme, and this theme of the Puppet Masters working towards total world global domination. You're one of those Puppet Masters with multiple paths to victory. That is going to be Deep State. Number 34, dropping down from number 27, is going to be Lords of Waterdeep. A 2 to 6 player, well, at least with the expansion, 2 to 6 player worker placement game in the Forgotten Realms D&D setting. And at the surface, this is actually a pretty simple game to teach. It is a very simple worker placement game where the basic objective of the game is the player is going to send out their workers to different locations. Every time they send one of their workers out to a different location, they're going to gain the benefits of that specific location. And the nice thing about this is it does add a little bit of the theme of the Forgotten Realms and D&D world into it. You can take controls of different buildings, which can add different locations of the board where players can send out more of the workers to. And if a player goes to a building that you happen to control, you're going to get a little bit of a spiff, they're going to get a little bit of a spiff, so the board becomes a little more interactive. The really cool thing about this game is the fact that the theme is actually married to the game actually pretty darn well. Now, I'm freely going to admit that if you replace the cubes with the D&D deeples, it makes the game look so much better. And yeah, I did it because the D&D deeples are just so darn cool. And they're kind of cute. Well, you got to use them. But the basic idea of the game is players are going to be trying to complete quests by sending their heroes to go out there and take care of these quests. And the way you can gain these heroes is by sending your agents out to these different locations to hire the heroes to handle these quests for you. So for example, if you need to eliminate a vampire coven that's attacked the city of Waterdeep, you send out 2 priests, 2 warriors, and a rogue to go ahead and do so. If you do so, you're going to be rewarded with prestige, victory points, and you're going to get some money from doing so. But here's the interesting, subtle thing about the game. Every single one of the players is one of the named Lords of Waterdeep. The trick is no other player at the table knows exactly which lord you happen to be, and every single player is going to be assigned a lord randomly at the start of the game. Every one of these lords gets extra special bonuses for completing specific quests that tie in with that specific lord. So while we may have a piety quest here and we may have an arcana quest here, as we're trying to complete these quests, we're trying to complete quests that our lord is really well renowned for, because if we do so, we're going to get bonus experience points at the end of the game, which is always a nice, or I say experience points, that's kind of funny. We're going to get bonus victory points at the end of the game. One more thing that's really interesting about this game, though, are going to be these intrigue cards. Now, these intrigue cards do things that I really enjoy about a good worker placement game, and allow you to slightly break the rules so nobody can rest on our laurels and say, hey, I got this location, I'm done, nobody can take this location from me. Oh, hey, I went out here and took this location, I got there forced, you can't take it from me. No, these intrigue cards allow you to slightly break those rules, whether it means you can take a location another player is already at, or maybe you can destroy the resources of the other players, or maybe you're going to do mean, cruel, okay, I like to say mean and cruel, but it's things I like to do. Things like force the other players at the board that they have to do mandatory quests, which are going to tie up their resources and not give them a lot of rewards. So things like that add to the subtlety and the strategy game. On top of that, I'm going to say the Scoundrels of Skullport expansion is a mandatory purchase. This adds so many extra things to the Lords of Waterdeep game. Extra tactics, extra strategies, extra boards. It adds a corruption mechanic and so many more things, and also brings the game up to a 6-player game. This is a wonderful worker placement game. It's a game that's been on my list for many years now. It's going to stay on my list just because it is such a simple game to teach, has a tremendous amount of replay, 2 fantastic expansions that I'm going to say are just mandatory to own with the basic game itself, and a wonderful way to play this game. And yeah, get rid of the cubes as quick as possible. Get those D&D deeples, because they really enrich the theme and the enjoyment of the game of Lords of Waterdeep. Number 33, and dropping down from number 21, is going to be Legendary Encounters Alien. Probably one of the best uses of the Alien franchise in a board game. Well, at least until I play that new game from Gale Force 9. Yeah, this is probably still going to be the best game. I'm still probably going to stick with that, because this is a game that's done the Alien franchise perfectly, 100% correct, and has done it so darn well. In the Legendary Encounters game, the basic idea of the game is the player is going to take control of a specialist, and this specialist is going to be your hero represented in one of the various Alien films, and that's one of the cool things about this game. You get to play through multiple different Alien films, or some of the side stories, or maybe even some of the non-fiction, that'd be pretty darn funny. Some of the fictional novels have been based on the Aliens novels, but the basic idea is you are taking your hero and you're going to recruit some of the classic heroes from the different movies, and you're going to use them to interact with the complex. Your objective is to figure out what your objective is to complete. Once you complete the objective, you're going to move on to the next objective, and if you finally manage to complete the final objective, you're going to win the game. Sounds easy? Well, it really is not, because this is a game that is extremely brutal, very tough, and extremely unforgiving, because every single turn, cards are going to move into the complex and they're going to keep moving down in the complex. Players need to play the cards in their hand to explore the complex and also recruit heroes from the show in an effort to do various different things. Now, these cards are going to come in face down, so you never know exactly what is coming down into the complex. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Or is it something that's going to make your life good, bad, miserable? Or maybe it just happens to be one of the objectives you need to win the game. Well, players need to spend their cards to interact with these locations before they get to the combat zone, because some of these cards, if they make it to the combat zone, something bad is going to happen. Whether it means that an alien is going to attack the players, whether things are going to get more difficult for our players, or just some random bad thing's going to happen, our players are going to start suffering strikes. If you take enough strikes, guess what? You're dead, because what I didn't show you about every one of your heroes is you have a certain amount of hit points. When your hit points are gone, yep, you guessed it, you are DEA dead. Well, okay, you're probably not dead. You're going to be a future facehugger food, because you are going to be dragged down to the Alien Queen's hive, where she's going to make you her next little toy and her next little project that will allow you to take out the rest of your heroes. Because, oh yeah, by the way, you can play as an alien. Oh, I know, it's fun. We all want to do it because it's really, really darn awesome. But basically, the player is going to use their cards to explore the airlock, the med lab, or these different locations in the complex in an effort to figure out things out what are going on. Maybe it's going to cause events that are going to happen. Maybe we're going to encounter biohazards, which are going to different depending on what location we happen to be in, which movie we happen to be playing the game in. Maybe we'll run into something such as a requirement that we need to complete an objective, or maybe things are going to get just a little more challenging for us. Maybe we're going to run into a facehugger, or maybe we're going to have an encounter with the alien itself. Our grand objective of the game is to get through all 3 objectives in the objective deck, complete that final objective and win the game before all of our heroes are defeated by these horrible aliens that are continuing to advance into the combat zone and again make our life miserable, and also defeating our heroes who have a very limited amount of hit point supplies. Now the great thing about the Legendary Encounters alien game is this game has done the theme of aliens so extremely well. Every time you play this game, you feel like you are living through one of the Alien movies, whether it's the first Alien movie all the way out to even some of the ones of these stories. If you buy the expansions, they're kind of loosely based on some of the books. And some of those books are extremely fantastic. If you're an Aliens fan, I can highly recommend those books because there's some really, really good books out there in the Alien universe. But this game has taken the classic idea of the Alien movies and allowed you to play through these movies in an interactive way, in a very challenging game, in a cooperative game that actually reinforces cooperative play between the players, has enough replay variety that you want to replay these movies over and over again. And there's even rules for a player to take over the role of the alien. There's rules to modify the events, and there's also ways to make these encounters much more challenging. Right now I have the easy objectives and the easy locations out. It is quite easy to ramp up the difficulty, make it much more challenging, and I can tell you, I've had this game for years. I have still not defeated every one of these movies on the hard mode because it's just that darn hard. Add in the fact that you have extra expansions, like add in extra storylines, and you have a game that's done the Alien franchise so darn well. That's Legendary Encounters Alien, a cooperative game for up to 5 players. Number 32, and dropping down from number 25, is the immense game of Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. This is basically what would happen if you took the classic PC game of Warcraft and turned it into a board game. You'd end up with pretty much Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. In the game of Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, the players are working competitively to take over the world and get the most victory points by resource gathering, by going to war, by attacking the other players, by exploring all the land, by basically doing everything you think you need to do in a resource gathering game, such as classic game of Warcraft 3 or games along those lines brought from the PC, brought over to the board game. And in this game, the players are basically going to start on their own little continent, and it's a fully unexplored continent. You're going to explore this continent by sending your workers out there to gather resources, experience different random locations that are going to be randomized every time they play the game, in an effort to get enough resources to eventually bring out their more powerful heroes. And maybe they'll start building up ships, maybe they'll manage to build airships, or maybe they'll do various different things such as upgrading their castle, or maybe they'll even start building towers that allow them to go across the land and explore across the land and do everything they need to do. Taking the classic gameplay of the PC game of Warcraft and bringing it over into the board game by offering the full feel of that style of game in an actual full board game. Now there's a lot of things to say about this game. Matter of fact, I can do a full hour-long video just talking about how much this game has in it, all the amount of awesomeness that's in this game, and the amount of fact that this is a game that you will enjoy playing over and over and over again. Let's talk about the game itself. 10 different factions that all play differently. They all have their own heroes, their own special units, their own special things that they can do, and they have their own style of play that they're going to have. You have a map that is going to be changing every single time you play, not because the map itself looks different, but because these exploration tokens are going to come out on the board different every single time you play the game. Sometimes exploration tokens are going to come out, they're going to encourage you to go exploring along the sea. Sometimes the exploration tokens are going to force you to go out there and explore the land, because you're going to need different kinds of resources. Different things are going to happen as the game evolves. As you're building up your castle, trying to do one of the 4 things that you need to do to win the game. Once one of the players trigger one of the victory conditions, the game is going to come to an end of that round, and the players add the victory points. Whoever has the most amount of victory points will be the grand winner of the game. Now, this game has so much replay potential. It is just so phenomenal. I mean, the game plays anywhere up to 6 players, and I haven't even mentioned the fact that this is actually a game that you can play solo. The game does come with a solo deck, and you can use these solo cards in the solo deck to go ahead and play this game solo versus against 1, 2, or 3 AI cards. It doesn't matter, because the amount of AI decks you own is the amount of AIs you can play against. Now, these AIs are not the most super brutal AIs in the world, but they're good enough that they're going to give you a challenge, especially if you're playing against multiple different AIs. And every one of these AIs is going to control their own faction, doing their own basic thing, trying to explore the world, working against you, creating a really fun solo game. This game also plays extremely well all the way up to 6 players. You have all these multiple different factions. You have your air faction, you have your underwater faction, you have your basic land factions, again with their different hero powers, different abilities. I haven't included the fact that you bring in siege engines into the game. You can bring in NPCs into the game. You can bring in mercenaries into the game. all these different things you can bring in this game to add into the replay and the variety and just the amount of enjoyment you can get out of this game. Now, Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea does a great job between being a resource manager, being between a slight war game, and also being between an exploration style game. Add in one more thing I haven't even mentioned is the fact that how combat is performed in this game is not your standard combat how you would think for most of these games. You're not going to be slinging dice at the other player. You're going to be playing cards, such as spells against the other players, and you're also each going to pick a card that you can play face down in front of you. Now, every player has their own hand of cards, and it's kind of like a rock, paper, scissors mechanic. And you need to look at what your opponent is bringing to the table, figure out what kind of cards work best against those kind of units, and figure out what cards you were going to play that's going to counteract it. And again, these cards cost you resources. They're going to cost you different things to go out and play these cards. And it's a little bit of a mind game because you look at the other player and go, okay, he's attacking me with these things here at this location right here, which means he's probably playing one or two cards. If I play this card, I'm going to be able to kick him back and send him to the curb because I actually have the resources to do so. But if I play this card over here, I don't quite have the resources. So I need to know what is he doing, what kind of cards they use, and how are they playing against me. That all goes together to create this wonderful game that is this great amount of enjoyment in this package, this giant package. I mean, if you own everything for the game, it's basically 3 full boxes full of cardboard, full of miniatures, and full of tons and tons of fun. That's Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. Number 31 and new to the list is going to be Dinosaur Island. Now, Dinosaur Island is a 1 to 5 player, I should say 5 player when you get the totally liquid expansion. And I guess I should also preface this by saying that my only experience with Dinosaur Island is actually with the expansion. I don't know what the game plays like without the expansion. So if the base game has anything in there that I'm going to miss, well, just understand I've only ever played the game with the expansion. So let's go ahead and get into this. Dinosaur Island is basically Jurassic Park of the board game. In this game, every single player is going to be taking control of a park, and it's a dinosaur park. You need to get the DNA you need to build up all these different dinosaurs to create these different attractions for all the people to come into, check out your dinosaur attractions, while making sure your security is good enough, keeping out the hooligans, because at the end of every single round, if your security is not good enough, the dinosaurs are going to get loose, and yeah, they're going to eat the patrons at your park. That's never a good thing. It doesn't matter what kind of park you run. Having your patrons eating, it's just bad business because, you know, they're not going to buy anything anymore. People are eating. They don't shop at your stores. Okay, seriously. So what you have done here is you have this game that is basically Jurassic Park, the board game, but it has done so many great, cool things to build in the mechanics of this board game to make it feel like you're just playing Jurassic Park, the game. There are so many interesting things just taking the basic idea of Jurassic Park, the board game. Let's just ignore that for just a second. Just look at all the cool things this game has done as a board game itself. Okay, the theme is awesome. I'm not going to argue about that. Nobody's going to argue that the theme for owning your own dinosaur park is super darn cool. Mechanics on top of the really cool theme is what makes this game so darn awesome. Let's look at the first thing here. Every time you play this game, you're going to take a certain amount of DNA dice based on the amount of players times 2 plus 1. So you see the game comes with 14 dice, so the max amount of dice you're ever going to use is 11. What's the big deal here? Well, not all these dice are the same. These 2 dice, if I roll them, they may never roll the same thing because guess what? They have different sides on them. So every time you play the game, you're going to have a different resource pool because these dice create the resources that you need that you're going to have to track on your scientific board to go ahead and build all these things, go ahead and build your dinosaurs, to create the DNA for these dinosaurs, to create the attractions, to bring in the nasty, mean dinosaurs. Because nobody wants to see a feathered little 2-foot serpent. Everybody wants to see the big giant T-Rex. The big guys. So you're trying to bring out the dangerous dinosaurs. But if you start bringing out the really cool, big, powerful, mean, nasty carnivores, guess what happens? Your security needs to be really good because otherwise people are going to be eaten. So you can make a more sedate park with more of the herbivores and everything like that, but it's not quite as exciting. Or you can go for all-in gusto and go ahead and bring the big marine things like the big giant dinosaur that can swallow, oh, I don't know, a whale in one bite. It's really cool to watch, but again, your security has to be good enough to make sure that all these things can happen. So, next thing that's really cool about this game is the fact that every time you play this game, you can play a short game, you can play a medium game, or you can play a long game. And depending on the game length you pick, you're going to pick a certain amount of objective cards, and those are the objectives the players are playing for. Once all the objectives are taken care of, that's going to be the end of the game, and that's going to create, you guessed it, more replay variety in this game. There's way more objective cards than you're able to use in a single game. Again, that adds to the variety. Next thing that we have up in this game is we're going to have plot twists. Every time you play this game, you're going to add in 2 plot twists, and these plot twists change up the rules and change up the style of the game. In a way, this game kind of reminds me of playing the game Nefarious. Nefarious is a game where every single time you play the game is going to have different rules for the game. It's not Stupid Munchkin, which has different rules for the game every time you play it because of really terrible mechanics. It has different rules for the game, making sure the game is never going to play the same way twice. And for me, having a game that has replay variety and replay value is one of the biggest things that I enjoy in the board gaming hobby. I don't like one and done games. I like games that I can play over and over and over again, have a different experience every single time I play the game. And that's something I get out of Dinosaur Island. I have different objectives, making sure that I'm playing my strategies differently every time I play the game. I have these plot twists, making sure that I'm playing my strategies differently every single time I play the game. I have different resources available to me every single time I play a game, guaranteeing that, you guessed it, I'm going to play the game differently every single time I play it. And I have different strategies. Do I go for the herbivore strategy? Do I go for the marine animal strategy? Do I go for the big nasty dinosaurs, which brings in a lot of people? But then again, my security better be pretty darn good. Otherwise, the people coming to visit my sites and these wonderful dinosaurs, they're not going to come back. Well, they may come back as heartburn for the dinosaur, but beyond that, they're definitely not coming back. That's Dinosaur Island, a game for 1 to 5 players, and a great game at number 31. Hope you enjoyed this video covering numbers 39 to 31. Don't worry, next video and beyond videos beyond that, I'll remember just exactly how to count. So look for my number 30 to number 21 games at my top 51 games of all time. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I'll definitely get to them as quickly as I can. You can also feel free to email me at off-the-shelf-board-game-reviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. I'll be sure to answer your questions as quickly as I can. If you enjoy this channel, you enjoy the content I put out there, think about supporting the channel over on Patreon. Just one simple dollar in the tip jar can help me cover my costs, keep this channel going, and help bringing out new content for you all the time. If you enjoy this video series, you've enjoyed this video channel itself, click that like button, click that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching. And don't forget, free board game, you know how. Send me an email, get entered in that contest. Giveaway is going to be the first Monday of March. Thanks for watching.